Welcome everyone to another Spotlight session. Today I'm incredibly excited to welcome our new guest, Suzanne Storey. First of all, Suzanne, thank you very much for taking some time with Spotlight.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here, Mum.
Yeah, very cool. Now, I will disclose, Suzanne and I have known each other for quite a few years, but we haven't connected for a few years. And I've really watched Suzanne's story and her executive career and now what she's doing lately, which we're going to talk about, which I personally love. And we're going to talk about that. But just a bit of background about Suzanne. So Suzanne's held a number of senior executive positions with incredible companies in the Australian market, companies like Qantas, CBA, IAG, and our National Rugby League as well, which for you American fans, it's the same as the gridiron and the NFL model. So Suzanne's also board member of Jardine and also Surf Life Saving Australia, which plays a big role in safety in Australia. Surf Life Saving, it plays a major role because we're pretty much surrounded by ocean. And also Suzanne is founder of Sky Coaching, but also co-founder of Unretreat, which we're going to talk a little bit about because I think it's actually something that we should all should consider. So Suzanne, first of all, thank you. And I just want to start by kicking off, your extensive experience really captures me. And you and I have done some work before when you were at CBA and we formed a relationship then, but I then watched what you did at NRL and IAG as well. And I just wanted to actually ask you, to share some knowledge with the audience around challenges. So what are some of the challenges that you see for business leaders today and leaning on all of that experience that you've had in the past?
Well, I think one, particularly, and I think it's heightened because of COVID, but, it would have existed anyway, is that, that focus on growth and profitability and really leaders having to figure out, if their business model has been impacted, not just by COVID, but by the digital acceleration that we're seeing around the world. And do they really have the skills and the capability to drive through the changes that they need to make to grow and to be profitable in that growth? They don't have the luxury to say, oh, we'll deal with that next year. Yes. They really need to be thoughtful about how they're managing that sort of digital strategy and acceleration. And then also being thoughtful about what is the likely or predicted exponential growth in technology over the next 10 years, potentially next 30 years, because that's likely to have an impact on their business as well. So what are they doing to learn and grow in that space? So that's one of the first ones. Yeah. I think the second one is, again, back to COVID, and I led the crisis response team for IAG during COVID and finished that roll up at the end of last year. Given in Australia, it's been managed pretty well in Australia and New Zealand, and the impacts are less. But now we're starting to see some research out of McKinsey, actually, that's showing that, 7 out of 10 people are reflecting on what do they want in their lives. Yes. Not just their career, but their lives more broadly as a result of COVID. And, they're really looking to, how they define their purpose through their work. And about the same number, about 70% of people say that the work has a big impact on how they see themselves. Yeah, right. And that's a human need, is to really see, how we're growing and developing our self-worth. Yes. And so this concept of, having purpose at work in the role that you are doing and or, I always talk about roles, I do 50%, which is, the job description, what the organisation needs me to do. Yes. And then make sure that, in the rest of my time in that role, how can I impact things within the organisation that I really care about? And that might be diversity and inclusion, as an example. I did a lot of work around that in IAG, as an example, and in fact in all organisations that I've worked in. Yes. Yeah. And I often think about, and I think it's becoming, more prominent for people to be thinking about this when they're deciding whether they stay in a role or whether they take on a new role. Yes. And I used to have these 3 rules, which were, is this a company or an organisation I could be proud to work for? Yes. Is it a boss I'm going to learn from? And is it a role where I can make a significant difference?
Love it. Yeah.
And if those three things line up, I find it really easy to get out of bed every day.
Yes. Yeah.
But if they don't, if any one of those don't capture, I guess, my heart and my head,
Yes.
then it's just not the right role for me, because I know I won't be motivated enough, inspired enough to do an awesome job. And I don't want to do a bad job.
Which connects with your why, right? It connects with what you are inspired by. You're inspired by not only good work, but having an impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the other thing I loved what you just said as well is that 50-50 balance is really interesting.
Yes.
Right? Because we've got a generational shift right now as well. When we look at the millennials and the influence they're now having on the workforce, their mindset is you're sort of like an early stage millennial in a sense that the way that you think, because you want to have a broader impact.
Yes.
You don't just want to do a job. You want to have a broader impact and involvement of things that you're passionate about. And we thoroughly embraced that mindset through the ideation framework. Everyone has motivation. Everyone has intrigue. Let's get it out of them. Let's engage them in a different way. It doesn't have to be a job description and a role. I love how you position that.
Yeah. And it's important because it impacts how they turn up every day. Yep. It impacts how they work and collaborate with the people around them. It impacts their health. And so, you know, and even whether they're likely to stay at the company or leave. You know, if they're not getting that opportunity to align with their purpose, they're more likely to leave.
Yes. Yeah. But it's interesting. I want to ask you the next question about, you know, looking at how you've personally changed over the years.
Yeah.
But before I do that, I want to touch on something that you just made me think about. I remember, and I'll just say it's in one of the largest financial institutions in Australia. And I remember being in their office and I saw a banner that said, "You are the voice of our company. You have 2 weeks to add your opinion, or like give us feedback." And I thought immediately, why does somebody only have a voice for 2 weeks? Yes, the voice is 24/7. Inspiration, ideas, you know, the thoughts, we all have them and they're 24/7, 365. So how do we create that environment? So it's sort of like you touch on a really passionate thing for me, because I'm all about how do we get everyone collectively in a way that they're inspired by, because we're going to get the best out of them.
Absolutely.
They're going to get the best out of themselves. I really want to sort of really draw out the experience as well. And I'm going to ask a personal question, if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
So your leadership style, as you've grown in your career, how have you seen that leadership style change?
And it really does touch on the point you made, which is accepting feedback. And in about 2000, so I had twins who were, you know, sort of 1 year old. I was sent off to Gettysburg in the US to do a global leadership program. And I went there thinking, this is awesome. It's going to be great for my career. I've been selected one of 20 people globally to go on this program. And after a week there, I walked out fundamentally changed as a leader, because I really understood it really wasn't about me. It was, what could I do to support my people to grow and develop? And part of that was me accepting feedback about my leadership style and the impact I was having on my direct reports and more broadly on my team.
Yes.
And learning to listen to that. So I then sort of moved on to Qantas, and, you know, at Qantas received some feedback. So 360-degree feedback was part of the process. And, you know, one of the pieces of feedback that I shared, that was shared with me was, you know, and it was sort of consistent, not in language, but in theme. You're tough, but you're fair. So people appreciated that, you know, I was fair, but this word tough, I really found challenging. And I really wanted to unpack what that meant and felt like to people. You know, was I aggressive? And it wasn't that I was aggressive, but actually when I unpacked it, what they said was, you have really high standards, and And that's challenging sometimes for us to meet, and you are unrelenting.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, you know, part of what has helped me be successful is, you know, having a vision
Yeah.
and executing against that vision, having measures in place, you know, working with the team so they're clear about, you know, where we're meeting that target, where we're not meeting, where we're on track, where we're off track. But this toughness still sort of was bubbling away. And I had to really understand how I could change my leadership style to
Yes.
still be effective in executing the
Yes.
strategy, but that I wasn't having this tough edge that people were feeling. And so really working with a coach, you know, how I then sort of worked on that was to ensure that I shared context more. So, you know, it wasn't just about what we needed to do, but why. So if
Yeah.
something had to be, you know, at a high standard, sharing with people why that was important.
Yes.
And that really made a difference, and showing them that I personally cared.
Yes.
And so I really love that concept of, you know, of caring personally
Yes.
and still providing feedback.
Mhm.
But, you know, that's super important, that you're showing people that, you know, it's not just for no purpose.
Yes.
You know, there's a reason that you have a high standard, but you actually care about them. And one of the things I really care about is their growth and development. So
Yes.
what I dialed up as a change in my leadership style was
Yes.
talking about their growth and development over and over and over again, and
Yes.
making sure that that was a constant conversation in our one-on-ones, not just something we spoke about once a year.
Yeah, love it. I'm getting goosebumps. I'm getting goosebumps because to me, you've got an edge, and I'm going to talk about a bit of you're a trailblazer, and I'm you know the way I look at you and how you have grown your career as a female executive as well. You were trailblazing as an executive in some pretty heavy industries, large organizations, like large organizations. So I want to touch on. I was going to go where I was getting really passionate was the way that you bring people on the journey.
Yeah.
I cannot have any more respect for a leader that thinks as much as about their team about what the business needs, because to me that's the perfect fit. Right? It's not all about what the business needs. It's also, well, what are our team doing and how do we make them successful? And how do we know that their success, definitely actually influences what we do, but how do we make it real for them? How do we make it tangible that they so feeling better? And you give that sort of perspective of it, and I just love it.
Mm.
Yeah. So let's talk about your trailblazing days. Right? So the feedback was one of it. If you were to, you did say to me earlier in relation to that, well, there wasn't a lot of mentors and coaches for you to lean on when you were going through those phases of your professional career. So what do you share with other young aspirational females as they go through their career? What are maybe 2 or 3 things that you would give them the advice of as you sit here today?
Yeah. So the first would be find coaches and mentors who are going to both nurture you and support you, but also be open to giving you really candid feedback.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, you know, I still work with a coach, even though I am a coach.
Yeah.
I still work with a coach because he really helps keep me on track.
Mm-hmm.
And I can have very safe conversations. You know, he's an experienced executive, and I can have, you know, very open and honest conversations, and he does back. And when I'm feeling, you know, whether it's at a loss or a bit flat about the journey that I'm on, he really does play a role in lifting me and keeping me focused on things that I can do to make a difference.
Yeah.
And whether that's in, you know, the business that we're growing, or in the different roles that I play on different boards, you know, it's fantastic to work with a coach. So that would be one.
Yes.
The second, I would, for young women, say, be kind to yourself, and particularly for young mothers. Yes. Who, are still experiencing some of the challenges that I experienced 20 years ago when my kids were little, which is that juggle. And I know it's, it's a lot more equal now in terms of men and women sharing parenting roles and duties, but there still is a big burden and that load that goes on, or women either take it on or it just is, there's a gap and they fill it, in terms of that mental load to be super organized, have everything under control at home and also at work.
Yeah.
And, that can be exhausting. So, be kind to yourself and make sure you build into your calendar, because that's kind of how we run our lives, that you've got time and space to do thinking, to do exercise, to sleep well, and to do stuff that you just love, that makes you laugh, that makes you smile. Like if you put me in the water and catching a wave, that's, one of the places that I'll always have a big smile. So going for a body surf is still something that, I find super relaxing, and it completely stops me thinking about anything else. So, find whatever it is to do that. The other one that I wish I had been given advice on early in my career, and I was seeing it, but I really didn't understand it. And my parents, I grew up on a farm, so my parents weren't in the corporate world, so this wasn't something that they necessarily gave me as advice. Was build your network.
Right.
So just as you and I have, been in a network together, I didn't understand early in my career the benefit of having an awesome network, or later in your career, the power of having an excellent network. And I would say for young women, spend time doing that, not just doing an awesome job. So, I feel I probably went long on doing a good job that would get noticed, and, that would help my career, which it does. But I think, one of the things that, at a point in my career, and this happened at Qantas, there was a finance leadership team meeting in the morning. The boys, the men, were all talking about they'd been to the State of Origin, which is in fact tonight in Australia, the Australia versus Queensland game, the first one this year. But they'd all been to one of those events, and I hadn't been invited. And I was the only female on the leadership team at that stage. And they, when I asked the question, well, why didn't I get invited? They said, well, you've got kids. We didn't think you'd want to come. And that's the network I was being locked out of. They weren't being malicious about it. They just, didn't think I'd want to come. But that's in part where all those bonds of getting to know each other at a personal level, getting to understand each other, trusting each other, that's all built. And so I wish I'd been more purposeful and strategic about building my network earlier in my career.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. 3 pieces of advice around mentoring. And I like the idea that today we're more comfortable with external, especially because it actually has a potential perspective of it. If you're 100% external element, be kind to yourself. That's really cool. And you and I talked about health as well. It's no longer just about the diet, it's the mental, it's the stimulation, it's doing something that's not even related to work. There's a lot of things. I'm going to talk about Unretreat in a minute as well. And then the third one, networking. Absolutely love it. Pick up 20 years ago. I wish we could do it again.
I know. But you know what? I think the other fantastic thing now is, I'm over 50 now, and I feel like I'm just hitting my straps.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because you have skills and experience now that you can really use for good on things that you're passionate about. And I'm super excited about the next chapter.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, for people actually anywhere in the world, I'm going to share Suzanne's details at the bottom of this, because I thoroughly recommend you reach out. Question to ask around what you're doing today, which I'm really excited by. So I've seen the LinkedIn stuff. You and I had some conversations online about it, and I've heard about the retreat. So I'd love for you to share with us what you're doing, what is Unretreat, and really what are you getting out of it? Because my sense is you're getting a lot of richness out of it.
Yes, absolutely. So I finished my executive career up at the end of last year. So, as I said, I was the crisis director for IAG for COVID. COVID-19, and really, given we had sort of operationalized our response, and it's still here and we're still having to deal with it, but really, I trained people up to be able to lead that team and let it function well.
Yeah.
And they didn't need me anymore, so I finished up there on 31 December, and then have started now what is a portfolio career. And that includes some non-executive director roles. So Jarden Australia on their advisory board, and Surf Life Saving Australia, which is one of my passions.
Yes.
And then I have the Sky Coaching business, which I've had going for a few years now, and it was really a side hustle, and now it's become more of what I do, which is coaching senior executives to be the best leaders they can be.
Yeah.
And I was doing some work with two girlfriends.
Mm-hmm.
One is a nutritionist and one is a physiotherapist. And what we shared with each other over coffee one day, actually, we were catching up, and we could see this need that the executives and the clients that we were all working with
Yes.
not only needed what we had, but a little bit of what the other two had.
Yes.
So that there was this sort of package that they needed. They didn't need just, career and life coaching.
Mm-hmm.
They also needed good nutrition advice.
Yes.
And a reset on their exercise and sleeping routines.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't need just good nutrition advice. They needed, how does that fit with my corporate life?
Yes.
Most of the executives were dealing with a corporate executives, and they needed, exercise or injury or recovery support. And
Yes.
so we came up with this concept of having executive retreats,
Mm-hmm.
always in beautiful locations where the participants get their own room, their own bathroom, their own safe space, because what we ask them to do on the retreat is do a lot of reflection about what's working for them in their life,
Yes.
what's not, what they are prepared to change.
Yeah.
And so that these beautiful locations, the three of us, and they get the package. They get nutrition, sleep, exercise, reflection. They get to think and work on what their values are,
Mm-hmm.
what their 15-year plans are, and not just for career, but around the wheel of life. So different elements, including relationship, including health,
Yeah.
community, financial security, across lots of different aspects, and we work and talk about that. And then we do a whole section on leadership in
Mm-hmm.
terms of what is contemporary leadership today.
Mm-hmm.
Get them to reflect again on where are they strong and where do they need some work, and then how can we support them to be the best leader that they can be. Now, of course, some of that is how are you turning up every day, and how you're turning up every day is going to be impacted by what you eat, how you sleep, are you exercising, are you managing stress. But giving them simple tips and toolkits and frameworks that they can implement straight away. Because if they don't do it straight away, it'll be something else they've read or something else they've learnt in a course, and they won't do it, or they won't do it for very long.
Yes.
So the other thing that I really have learnt through coaching is that it is not enough to do one session with a coach. That's great, you'll learn some stuff, but back to my point, if you don't apply it within 6 days, you will have lost 75% of it.
Yeah.
You won't remember it and you won't do anything about it. So the coaching that we do at Unretreat then is followed up by sessions as an alumni group.
Yeah.
And it's awesome because we bring the people back together and they share what's working for them now,
Yes.
what changes they've made to their life. It keeps them on track.
Yeah.
And they share where they're struggling. We also, one of the things I bought for my husband, so it wasn't Valentine's Day this year, the year before, was the Whoop band.
Right.
And
Yep.
that's changed my life because
Yeah.
it's giving me feedback. We talked about feedback being important before, and this is something I can control,
Yes.
which is me understanding that I needed more sleep, doing something about it, getting the feedback,
Yes.
repeat, exercising more, getting the feedback, repeat. So
Yeah.
I'm actually the healthiest version I have been of myself for probably 20 years,
Yeah, I
which
love
is incredible. But I had to take control. I had to
Yeah.
take control back for me
Yeah.
to really make the changes that I need to make. So I think, that combination of having time away and people really needing that, and particularly after COVID and after the years that people have had in lockdown or multiple lockdowns, taking them away, giving them that time to reflect and giving those tips and tricks and things they can apply immediately, and then the follow-up. That's the powerful combination of Unretrain.
Yeah, I love it. And you talked about in that environment, because you touched on it. It's interesting. The one of the biggest pivotal points in your career was feedback.
Oh, absolutely.
It was also a little bit confrontational.
Absolutely.
Feedback. So you felt, because you're so aware internally of going, well, okay, but you had to you had to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, I guess.
Yes.
In that model. And I love how you talk about that, because there's a lot of us that aren't comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because it is a complete internal reflection. Things that we need to understand. We need to hear the feedback, understand it, then agree or disagree with it. And then if we agree with it, find the right path to move it forward in a positive way for you and those around you.
Absolutely.
And that Unretreat for me just absolutely really embodies that, which I love.
And that's what we say to executives on the first day that they arrive. And everyone's awkward because they don't know each other. And then we sort of kick the sessions off with, this is going to be a weekend of you feeling outside of your comfort zone. That's the whole point. You're in growth, and you're not going to learn or change or reset if you don't feel uncomfortable. So be prepared to be uncomfortable. Be prepared to try things that you might think are twee or ridiculous, but be prepared to work with us through the process, because you will learn.
Yeah, it sounds very holistic.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's one of the biggest things. If I take away when we were going through our junior careers, leadership, and then executive, is if the idea of holistic was really a framework that we understood, we would have got a lot more things right.
Yes.
On the way, because I absolutely failed in so many areas of the holistic plan. Very successful in areas, but absolutely, if you reflect back on it, and that's what to me you're doing, you're allowing people to actually have that holistic look at what it means to them, and then how can they actually then impart that to everybody else. I love that. Hey, it's interesting. You talked about the watch, and you've inspired me to get back to it, by the way.
Oh, fantastic.
I was doing triathlons a couple of years back, and I remember, and I was working out every day, 4 o'clock. It was great. I remember one day the watch told me, do you want to know what your least active walking days are? And it was the reverse psychology of the question.
Yeah.
Do I want to know what my least, in my brain, I said, you're calling me lazy on a day of I want to know what that day is.
Yeah.
It happened to be a Tuesday.
Ah.
Really interesting. And I went back on my Tuesday plans, because I'd already swum 3-4 kilometers in the morning.
Yes.
I just got back to being immobile during the day. I was in the office working. And I thought, actually, you know what? There are areas. And then I said, well, would you like to know what the top 10 areas to improve step count? And they're things that we know, stairs instead of lift and these things but it was really an interesting way they tackled the psychology of the question.
Yes.
It wasn't saying, here's the least, okay, great, got it, yeah, fine. It asked me a reverse psychology. I went, yeah, I'm a competitive guy. I want to know what the day is. What is that day? It was very funny. So you inspired me to get back into it.
Fantastic.
Hey, Suzanne, thank you very much for spending time with us. Every time I catch up with you, I love it. I love your clarity. I love your purpose, and your purpose is, when you and I were really doing work together, was organizational purpose and where you wanted to, what we had to do together. But I really get a sense of that clarity of that holistic view that you're shining through this screen right now, by the way. And I just love spending time with you. So thank you very much for spending time in our spotlight session.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And look forward to catching up again soon. Let's not make it so long between catch-ups.
No, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Have a great day. See you.